Today we're taking a look through the FAQ and Errata for Codex Space Marines in 9th edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. So the FAQs and Erratas for the various different codexes for 9th edition 40k have finally come out. Plenty of changes in here for the Space Marines, both major and minor, so today I thought we'd just go through them one by one and talk about how they're going to impact the game. Let's jump straight into it. So first of all, there are the things that are sort of conspicuous by their absence. As we've seen from the new datasheets from the Indomitus box, things like storm shields, plasma weapons and chaplain litanies have all undergone some changes. Storm shields in future versions look like they're going to be 4+ invul saves and adding 1 to your save roll. Plasma weapons are going to be overheating on only unmodified rolls of 1, and chaplain litanies will be happening in the command phase. As of yet, Games Workshop has not decided to update things en masse with these particular rules. As it stands at the moment, storm shields will still be 3+ invuls, plasma weapons will still overheat more when you're firing at something that's hard to hit, and chaplain litanies still happen at the start of the battle round. I'm kind of in two minds as to whether or not they should have bothered updating all this. It would have been quite a lot of FAQs and admin for people to wade through, but it would have meant that we'd have everyone on the same playing field right from the word go. I still think that these changes are pretty certain to be coming out, but it looks like we'll have to wait for an actual updated Codex Space Marines until we start seeing them taking true effect. Until then, they remain the properties of only models in the Indomitus box. Next, they've updated the wording on basically every single sniper weapon in the game. They all ignore the Look Out Sir rule, which is the new wording for character protection. Basically every weapon that could do this, from sniper rifles to ex tenebris, they've just updated the wording on every single rule. No real change how these function then. They've also changed the wording on every single camo cloak, which is a little bit different to normal, seeing as cover works differently in 9th. Now camo cloaks will add +1 to your saving rolls when you're receiving the benefit of cover, but receiving the benefit of cover doesn't have to just mean being in light cover to get +1 to saves. I believe that it can also be using things like dense cover, for example, which would give you -1 to hit. So if that rule applies to the unit that has the camo cloak, you could just be getting +1 to your save from the camo cloak, and then also the -1 to hit from dense cover. Not quite as straightforward as it was before, but it does kind of make sense. Basically every Land Raider, Repulsor and Storm Raven has had the power of the Machine Spirit deleted. Now all vehicles move and shoot with no penalty whatsoever. It was a bit of a redundant rule, though I was disappointed that they haven't chosen to update it to something else, which I think would have been better than just getting rid of it entirely. Games Workshop have mentioned in previous previews that they are going to be changing the power of the Machine Spirits to work in a different way. Again, I suspect that this is something that they'll be rolling out in the next Space Marine Codex, as opposed to in these FAQs for the main book. A bit annoying really, it would have been nice to have something as a stopgap, but technically they all have that same rule baked into their profile now, it's just that every single vehicle in the game also acquired it as well. One of the biggest actual changes to the way that the rules work is changing the White Scars chapter tactic. They basically added the ability for White Scars to advance and shoot with assault weapons for no penalty at all now. Before, White Scars could only do this with bikes, but now it's going to be a lot more free, so things like melter guns and auto bolt rifles, which were already decent in White Scars armies thanks to advance and charge, just became a whole load better to take. I suspect that this change was probably made to make up for losing the biker's heavy weapon bonus. Basically, in the past, White Scars bikers could move and shoot heavy weapons for no penalty to their hit roll, and again, seeing as every single chapter gets that now, I think that this change was made to recompense them for that. Overall, it's most certainly a buff to the White Scars chapter tactic, and it's only made them just a little bit stronger. Interesting that they chose to give them something else different and unique, but not Land Raiders and Repulsors and things. Drop pods don't count towards the reinforcement limit, so in theory I think that if you bought an entire army in drop pods, then I still believe that you could do an entire reserve Space Marine list entirely in drop pods. They've clarified that drop pods have to come in at turn 1 to turn 3 under the new reinforcement rules, so just good to have that spelled out in black and white. I'm sure we'll be seeing a few more drop pods on the table, thanks to the changes to some of the heavy and special weapons, particularly those grav cannons on Devastators. Next, they've changed the land speed of Storm to clarify that you can only shoot pistols in engagement range, which can be fired by any of its occupants. I believe that this was just updated to use the phrase engagement range. They've changed the wording on the Indomitable Successor trait. It still functionally works the same way. Basically this one only allows one model to flee per unit per turn, and now it effectively does the same thing, but the mechanic is that you ignore the combat attrition test, the one that you test for after you've failed a morale test. When you fail a morale test, one model just goes away automatically, so it basically functions the same. Chapter Master Lysander's Icon of Obstinacy also seems to work the same way now. This is also being farmed out to the Dark Angels, whose Grim Resolve also works similarly. They've just removed the Big Guns Never Tire stratagem entirely, seeing as that one used to prevent vehicles from taking any penalties for moving and firing with heavy weapons, and now none of them do, so it's pretty much redundant and no one was ever going to use it. Out of the core Space Marine successor books, the biggest changes come to the Ultramarines and Imperial Fists, though of course we have already mentioned the White Scars chapter tactic. Ultramarines have had the wording on Calm Under Fire clarified. It's the one where nearby units can fall back and shoot without even taking the -1 to hit penalty that Ultramarines normally do. They basically just changed it to make sure that -1 penalty is the only one they're ignoring, and they don't just ignore any -1 to hit penalties in general. They've tweaked the wording on defensive focus. Basically this is the Ultramarine stratagem that allows nearby units to overwatch to support a nearby unit that was charged. It basically means that Ultramarines just have a fair bit more access to overwatch than most chapters, who are usually only going to be able to do it with one unit for one command point per turn if they want to. They've also just addressed one issue with Sergeant Kronos, meaning that you only gain points for Slay the Warlord if you kill Kronos himself and not his vehicle. Imperial Fists, we mentioned the Lysander change. I'd also like to draw attention to the way that their chapter tactic works, which is actually clarified in the rare rules section of the main 9th rulebook, and I missed it the first time of reading. Basically because of the way that it's worded, it is literally just going to ignore light cover, it's not going to ignore things like dense cover for the -1 to hit. So I think their chapter tactic has become a little bit weaker due to this, because now instead of ignoring the main benefit of cover, they only ignore a subset of the benefits that cover can give you. Finally, and somewhat fortunately, there is an FAQ for the Edge of Silence book, the one that has the datasheet for the Indomitors miniatures, and this is basically just changing the Storm Shield wording to prevent it from breaking the game. I did make a video where we discussed this before. Basically, if the current Storm Shield rules apply to models with a 2+ save, then rules as written they'd be getting a 2+ invulnerable save essentially. It was very silly, and I was certainly expecting them to FAQ that, so I'm just glad that they've done it sooner rather than later. They'll now be working a lot more as intended. They just give you +1 to the saving throw rolls, rather than giving you +1 to the saving characteristic itself. So that's it for the core Space Marine FAQs, and the ones for the supplement books. Hopefully I'll be back to cover some more of the FAQs at some point over the next day or so. We'll most certainly be looking at some of the changes for some of the other Imperial factions. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more similar ones like this, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you have been enjoying all the coverage of 9th edition, then any support on the channel's Patreon page is greatly appreciated. All of the content does take quite a long time to make, so if you have been watching a lot, then any support would really help. If you are interested, then channel Patrons get to see one video per week early, you get to vote on regular polls to see what comes next on the channel, and there are also regular monthly prize draws, which Patrons are entered into automatically. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.